Vitores, my bachelor's thesis there. Today, I'm going to present to you all unpacking the economic legacy of the Chicago Boys in post-1980. So, what happens when a country becomes the richest of this region, but people feel left behind? In 2019, protests in Chile began. Sparked by a minor fare increase, they evolved into a nationwide outcry systematically decades of inequality. As you can see in that picture, that says Chile woke up for a big So why did I choose Chile? As many of you know in this room, I'm from there, so I get to experience most of the things firsthand. And when it happened, it was a broad topic discussion in my school. Like nobody knew why it was happening. Some people might know, but like it was very important for me. And it's also very important for the economic global points. You know, it was the first Latin American country to fully embrace neoliberalism and has long been upheld by economists and institutions like the IMF as a success story. While GDP grew and foreign investment soared, these gains were not equally shared. Many Chileans were left behind with low pensions, unfunded healthcare, and unequitable education systems. This thesis is going to address that paradox. How could a model be praised so good internationally are so widely rejected at home? Who benefited from all this economic success? So I'm going to be talking a lot about the Chicago Boys. So like, who are they? Like as the name says, it's very simple. We're these Chilean economists, people that studied at the University of Chicago under Milton Friedman, that it was the father of neoliberalism, some might say, and their return to Chile coincidentally with the General Pinochet's rise to power, giving them a unique opportunity to implement a radical economic agenda. With little democratic oversight, the policies centered around privatization, deregulation, and shrinking the public power. What happened in Chile wasn't a gradual shift, it was an economic revolution. Over 500 state-owned companies were sold off. Labor laws were rewritten, public services were transferred to private, and this sudden transformation made Chile a neoliberal laboratory, admired by some, but questioned by many. So what is this neoliberalism that I keep talking about? Well, simple definition is a policy model that encompasses both politics and economics and seeks to transfer the control of economic factors from the public sector to the private sector. What does that mean? They want the least amount of state control in their policies. They want private to control everything they can. So what we're going to talk about today is just basically 3 topics. It's going to be before 1980, what was happening in Chile, what was the conditions that led to all this change. We're going to talk about the key agencies that made, for example, the Chicago Boys and who was Augusto Pinochet. And finally, our main focus is going to see what was the actual legacy that the Chicago Boys left in Chile in 1980 after that, because it did create a lot of growth, but what happened that created the 2019 revolts. For my research of justice, the purpose is to critically evaluate the long-term impact of the privatization process on both economic and social fronts. I asked whenever the reforms generally benefited the broader population or primarily served only the elite at the top. To do this, the research is going to examine an economics indicator like GDP, poverty ratios, Gini coefficient, and many more. Additionally, the research considers the democratic implications of these reforms, particularly the ways in which public's dissatisfaction with inequality culminated in a widespread protest that demanded funding constitutional reform. So, what was happening on in Chile before 1980? We had this very interesting model that is called import substitution industrialization model, ESA, that basically meant that the state controlled most of these companies. The state controlled copper, energy, banking, and many more. Copper was a primary export to Chile, so it was a very big deal, because we're getting all our money from that. So what does it mean that when state control is? Well, it means that they aim to protect domestic production from international competition, foster local industry, and reduce reliance on imports. It is important to note that in Chile, the first democratic social president in 1970, Salvador Allende, and meaning that not many a lot of the powerhouses in the world, I don't know if you know or familiar with that, but that was the Cold War type of a frame. So the US, England were not very happy with that because that they lost not only a big island, but a lot, you know. So with that, a lot of things happened at the time. It's well known right now that the CIA had a lot of implications in Chile at that moment. But however, by the early 1970s, they faced some material problems. Salvador Allende tried to nationalize copper. That is, if you think state labor was a lot of the state implication, nationalizing the copper was even a bigger step. And with that, they had crazy economic instability. And as you can see in that image, that was an image of just buying bread. That was a grocery shop. And like, when you see that, you just start to ask, like, that's not a good crowd. And the other critique in Chile that has a lot of power were not happy about this at all. And they really tried to take this push for a new government. So what happened to this? This led to in 1973, a military coup led by Augusto Pinochet shifted the nation towards an authoritarian rule and economic liberalization. So what changed? What changed in Chile? What were the main neoliberalism reforms? The Chicago Boys usually initiated a sweeping of the new ideology driven by a set of neoliberal reforms under the authoritarian protection of Augusto Pinochet regime. Inspired by free market theory from the University of Chicago, their approach was rooted in the minimizing the role of the state and maximizing market efficiency. Over 500 state-owned enterprises were privatized, marking one of the most aggressive divestment in modern history. This included utilities, banks, transportation, and all this, they created, not only that, but they created the framework for that. They changed the rules, they changed the laws, so they were protected, not forever, but basically forever. In parallel, the government dismantled and protected labor legislations. Union powers drastically curtailed, collective bargaining was decentralized, and labor contracts became more flexible, making it easier for employees to hire and fire workers. This deregulation was also presented as necessary to improve productivity, because you have to sell this idea to the people. So you present this and you sell, with these laws, we're going to have better investment, more people are going to invest, and we're going to become a better country. After this, we might say, why did the people didn't protest or not? Well, institutions like the IMF and the World Bank held these reforms. They loved this. They modeled discipline and efficiency. For them, Chile was the proof that even in the developing world, rapid liberalization and fiscal conservatism could yield impressive economic results. Indeed, Chile's macroeconomics indicators, such as inflation control, GDP, and growth and investment levels initially improved, and earning the country the label of the neoliberal miracle. However, these reforms also laid the groundwork for a deep socioeconomic inequality, and would later inspire heated debates about the long-term costs of regulatory markets overhead. So what are the main privatization case studies for me? It's water and electricity. Yes, water got better, everybody got access to water, electricity got better, everybody had access to electricity, but we had a supply, but no demand. People could not pay the new prices of these, because now it was not state, it was private, so they want to win money for this. They don't want to give you these things for free. So many people in the rural places had the access, but didn't have the funds to pay for these new things. Health system, they changed it, now it's a dual system, it's called ISAPRE versus FONASA. ISAPRE is the private one. What does it mean? You pay another company some money so they can cover your medical charges later, and FONASA is the normal public one that everybody cannot pay extra gets. Pension market was very highly affected. It's a very important market because it created a pension. Now you have your own pension. You take care of your own pension. Meaning, like, you almost haven't seen the market the past month. You've seen how volatile it is. So what happens if you have your own money and you start like semi-investing with no knowledge into all these plans? Obviously you're going to lose money at the end of the day. And education also changed. With this, I think it's important because it just laid the groundwork for how unequal the country is going to be later, because now you have private and public education, private being very good, public being very bad, and that just creates more unequal country than today because they can now have the same opportunities. Was it all bad? No, it was not. Chile experienced successful economic gains. As you can see here, real GDP per capita means how much average home gets into their own. As you can see, in 1960, not very much. 1973 started going down, And after 1980, we've seen this happen. And that's a massive sign for each person in Chile that lives there that it's just getting a lot of money. And for the real GDP, it's basically a similar idea. It's just about how a country brings their own money. And as you can see, 96 is also very, very stagnant. 1970 it started going down. And after 1980, we have seen a 400% increase on Chile's GDP. That means Chile is 400% in some way richer than it was before, 45 years ago. So that's very good. But for me, my most important one is the poverty rate. Poverty rate drops from 35% to 6%. Almost a third of the population of Chile was poor in the early 2000s and before that. So now having only at 6% of the population being poor, if you want to know, the US has around 11 to 12% poverty rate. So that means, technically speaking, Chile has a lower percentage of poverty than the US. So that's a great statistic to have. You know, that's why so many people praise this model, because it has created very good things. But what happened? You might see this picture and think, oh, that's a great edit picture. That's not an edit picture. That's a real picture from Chile that tells you the story of like what's going on in the country. You know, you have all the things money can buy you, separated by a single wall, and what could be the next step. You know, despite all these strong macroeconomics performance following the neoliberal reforms, the distribution of wealth and access to opportunity remain deeply uneven. The Gini coefficient that is used to measure inequality in a country stayed still being one of the highest in the OECD, that are the countries that they want to get, you know, tested by the Gini coefficient. So while some Chileans accumulated wealth through foreign investment and many more, not everybody got the money that they deserve. So one of the key drivers of this, you know, social cost was the deregulated labor market. Now that you don't have the capacity to make a union, all collectively go to strikes and something more like that, now you don't have the access to complain. So you're just scared that you're not going to have your own job the next day. So like we have a workplace that is more stagnant. You have low wages, and you're like, I want it because I need to take care of my family. I'm not going to protest because like you cannot argue. Like they're going to fire you. It's very easy to fire. Not anymore. You know, you have been changing the laws slowly steps. So it's a little bit more difficult right now. But that's what happened at the beginning. That's what they created. But it's also not only that, but they see the other side of the coin. You know, people that had this private education, people that went to this private place have amazing pictures. As you can see in the picture, you know, healthcare in Chile is fantastic if you have private. Education in Chile is fantastic if you went private. So that with that, it creates just deep anger and inequality. And what does that bring you? To 2019 social upbringing in Chile. This small trigger in the metro fare that it was about 30 pesos. And if you ask me how much 30 pesos is, it's about 30 cents. So it's not about the price of that. It's about the frustration that all this comes into place. This, by the way, it's taken 2 minutes away from the house. That's that close to like, it's just all over the place. And it was just, how the people felt being so frustrated with all this, and just years and years of systematic oppression against lower class people. And it just with that, they just had, and with that, we had a new president. It's called Gabriel Boric, that is also a democratic elected president in Chile again, and he promised a new constitution. With that, we had 2 trials of 2 constitutions, none of them got approved. Not by the president and the government, none of them got approved by the people. So we still have the same constitution. Interesting thing to know. So, what is the legacy of the Chicago Boys? That had a different font, I don't know what is that? As you can see, Chile has great infrastructure. Chile is in a great place in Latin America to keep growing. Great workers, we have great everything. But they turned Chile into a dynamic, export-driven economy, but they left a deep legacy of inequality. Policies helped stabilize inflation, attract foreign capital, and modernize industry, making Chile a standard in Latin America. Yet this accomplishment came at a social cost. Inequality, market exclusion, and weakening public system fostered public discord. Today, their legacy is being reassessed, especially in the context of demand for a more equitable and democratic society. So to conclude, Privatization and liberalization contributed to Chile's economic miracle, but failed to deliver inclusive prosperity. While GDP and foreign investment rose, so did inequality, insecurity, and social unrest. The benefits of growth were concentrated among the wealthy, while many Chileans struggled to access to quality education, healthcare, and retirement. The future of Chile's development modernized and balancing efficiency with fairness. This means revisiting policy structures, restoring the role of the state in ensuring equitable access, and rethinking how economic success is defined. Because growth without inclusion is not sustainable. Thank you so much.
Excellent job. Are there questions for Remy about this wonderful presentation?
Please, any questions?
I know this wasn't a comparative study, but are you seeing any parallels between current U.S. economic policy and deregulation with some of the same concepts that were presented in Chile?
So it's an interesting topic because not most, but like a lot of the policies that the U.S. has right now in place, they tested in Chile before. You know, this was not only like oh, we're gonna try it. No, it has a lot of politics behind, and they had tried it before in Chile. And like, yes, we have seen growth, as you can see, but like the U.S. has like a more polished version of what we have in Chile, I would say. So